Recently, I tried to ride across an entire country in 2 days during a heat wave, and if you missed that video, it's linked down below and up there in the box. This route was the Trans-Cambrian Way, a 100-mile or 160-kilometre route that goes across the width of Wales. And this is the bike I chose, the brand new Cannondale Topstone Carbon. Given this route was developed back in the 90s when mountain biking was king, and all the online guides talk about a mountain bike being the best choice for a tough and grueling route, I naturally thought a gravel bike would be the perfect choice. And that's because modern gravel bikes like the Topstone Carbon are so damn capable, and I wanted to find out if a modern gravel bike can do a route that was originally developed for mountain biking. But before I share my ride impressions of this new bike and whether it's the right bike for the cause, let me go through some of the updates to the new Topstone Carbon and talk about my bike packing setup. The Topstone Carbon has been around for a few years now, and while this new bike shares all the features of the original, like the geometry and a kingpin rear suspension, for 2022 there are some very big and important updates, and finally a bike I would consider personally buying and definitely recommending to you at home. So most importantly, we now have a non-asymmetric rear end. The old bike had an offset rear wheel, which meant you couldn't fit any rear wheel unless it was redished. But now you fit any regular rear wheel and it's all fine. You still have space for a 45mm wide tyre with 6mm clearance around the wheel and the frame, and that's a big improvement. We also, like the Synapse released a few months ago, have a threaded bottom bracket, so no more BB30, and an external seat clamp, and you fit a regular round seat post, either a carbon save one like this or a dropper seat post if you want to do some gnarly off-road riding. The frame has also lost around 100 grams of weight, and the kingpin suspension has been updated with bushings rather than bearings. And the other big story on this bike at least is we have the Smart Sense light and radar technology first debuted on the Synapse. So we have the battery down here which you can remove, we have a front light up here and a rear light and radar out back. And as you can see, because I use GoPro mounts, you can reposition the lights as you want. You can have the light underneath the saddle or on the back of the rack, and this one's been lowered to fit a handbar bag, so you have lights and radar baked into the bike using one battery. And for a bike packing setup, it's a big bonus. You have to have lights when you're bike packing because you might run later than planned, and fitting lights when you have bags and other things strapped to the bike can be really tricky. So the way they're baked into the bike here makes a lot of sense. I've been spoilt riding a top of the range model costing £8,000, but it's worth pointing out the carbon range starts at £2,800. There's a new alloy model which starts at £1,150. So there are plenty of options in the range to suit your budget and your requirements on group sets. Now, one of the reasons for the high price is because you are getting that Smart Sense technology. Lights front and rear and a radar and a battery all baked into a frame design, and that quite a cost on its own if you bought them separately. Then we have a SRAM Force E-Tap Access group set. They're 2x with a 4330 chain set and 1136 on the back. This hasn't changed my mind on 1x being better and more suited to gravel riding in my experience. I find most of the time the lower gear could have been lower on some of the steeper climbs, and while you do have more top end, most of the time when you are riding off-road and bike packing, you spend more time in the lower gears than worrying about that top end gear range. So for me, I prefer to have the Explore gearing with a 1044 cassette on the back and a single chainring on the front. The other reason for the price are these very high-end wheels. They are the company's own hologram carbon fiber wheels, and they weigh a claimed 1,325 grams, which is super lightweight considering they are really wide, a 27mm internal rim width. They're full tubeless, but you can run clincher tyres if you want, and the hubs have high quality DT Swiss 240 internals, so very high quality wheel set. And despite smashing them over some really rocky and slaty tracks, they're still running true, no dents in the rim, and the spoke tension is still good. So a nice high quality wheel set that won't let you down. But what did let me down were WTB Riddler tyres. Now, these are great tyres, make no mistake. Super fast on the road and fast on the gravel, and plenty of grip providing it's dry, and the 45mm width gives you loads of cushioning and comfort. And for most trail riding, they are just fine. But the light sidewall just isn't beefy enough for the very extreme tracks we encountered in Wales. One track in particular, about 15k in length, was just covered in slate, a thick, deep layer of slate. You couldn't go around it, couldn't pick your line, you had to barrel over it and cross your fingers and hope you didn't get a puncture. But a puncture I did. The first 2 or 3, should I say, I managed to fix. Had one in a sidewall, and then a double puncture up by a tread and down by a bead, which I managed to fix. But when a bit of slate slashed the sidewall, that was unfixable and required an inner tube. So a tyre with a beefier sidewall would have been nice on that very demanding trail section. But it's worth emphasising the fact it's the most extreme trail I've ever ridden a gravel bike along. Never encountered anything like it before, so very, very extreme case. Most of the time, these tyres are absolutely fine. Right, let's talk bike packing setup, and we're about to get really geeky. And for this trip, I tried to go as light as possible and take the minimal amount of kit I needed. And I tried a different setup than usual as well. And we'll start at the back. So I used a tailfin last year and really rate it. I prefer it to a seat pack because you don't have to strap it to the seat post, don't scratch your frame and doesn't sway around. It's really secure, as you can see, and that I think is a better option. Quite a spendy option, but it works really well. So loads of space in here for all my cooking equipment, food, spare clothes on the bike and off the bike, tools and other bits and bobs, and you can strap it all down nice and tight. And then at the front, I deviated from my normal bike packing setup. Normally, I'd have a wide handlebar bag with all my sleeping equipment, but I tried a different approach. Because I had the 3 bolts on the fork, I tried the 2 bags from Tailfin. So in this one, I have my tent, and on this one, my sleeping bag and roll mat. The weight, what weight there is, pretty light, is nice and low, and these have the added benefit of bushwhacking overgrown paths, brambles out of your way. And then a small handlebar bag stuffed full of food, stuff like Haribo, an essential bike packing option. And then a small bag here from Apidura for my GoPro, so it's easy to whip out and start filming at a moment's notice. And it's a setup that worked really well. Had just enough space for everything I needed, but no extra capacity for more stuff. But for a longer bike packing trip, I could put 2 more bags on the back of this rack and maybe go for a wider bag on the handlebar. There's also space for a frame pack and a top tube pack. But personally, I don't really like top tube packs because my knees tend to rub on them. And a frame pack will be fairly tight here with 2 big bottles I needed because we were riding during a heat wave. And that's the idea behind this setup, to try and get away from a frame pack and a top tube bag. And I have to say, it worked pretty well. Now, if you want to see a more conventional bike packing setup, then check the video linked up there for a guide to how to set your bike up and some of the basics you need to know if you are going bike packing for the first time. So was this the right bike for the Trans-Cambrian Way, or should I have chosen something different? I can happily admit it was the right bike and I'm really happy with my choice. With the exception of the rear tyre not being beefy enough and the low gears not being quite low enough for some of the steeper climbs, the bike was absolutely superb and I really enjoyed riding this bike over the 3 days we did in total. 2 days for Trans-Cambrian Way and 1 day to ride home. The bike is fast on the road with the tyres and fast on the gravel as well. The geometry gives you a nice balance of that agility you want when you're riding twisting trails, and it really puts a smile on your face. But then it's really planted at high speed, and when you're riding on a trail where there's rocks and roots and it's all loose and sketchy, the bike definitely holds the line really well and definitely, to use a cliche, inspires confidence. And that's what you want in a bike packing bike. A bike that can be at home and definitely shine in all different situations, but some of which you might never have encountered before. And then the comfort of the bike was the most surprising element. You have fat tyres of course, but I'm running high pressures, 40 psi minimum at the back to account for extra weight from the bags. But despite such high pressure and riding over really rough and rocky and dry terrain, as you can see, we've had a heat wave here for a few weeks now and the ground is really hard. That kingpin rear suspension, but not actually suspension, but engineered flex in the rear stays, does lead to much more comfort than a fixed rear triangle. and it's something you can actually see working. I had a friend, Craig, riding a Topstone Carbon with a lefty fork, and beside him I could see his rear triangle kingpin area actually moving and flexing as I ride along behind him. So seeing that working on another bike out there in the wilderness really shows you the benefits of this system over a more conventional fixed rear triangle. And despite not having any similar suspension up front like a lefty fork, the front end was still surprisingly smooth. It wasn't like all the shocks were going through the handlebar and beating my body up. The whole bike felt smooth front to rear. It didn't feel like an unbalanced bike, all cushy at the back and stiff at the front. It felt nice and balanced and controlled and composed. So for me, the bike was absolutely the right choice for the Trans-Cambrian Way. If I did it again, I'd change a few things, go one by and put a beefier rear tyre on. But other than that, the bike, in my opinion, passed with flying colours. And now I give it a wash, take the bags off and go for a gravel shred in the woods or go for a nice road ride. It's such a versatile bike, fast everywhere, capable in a bike packing setup, or just fun when you're riding around the woods on a weekend. And if you haven't watched my Trans-Cambrian Way experience, then that's linked up there if you want to go and watch that and see how we got on with the bike over 2 days of riding in extreme weather across extreme terrain in Wales. And if you haven't subscribed yet, then hit the button just here. But that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again very soon.